hate it, I hate it, I hate it so much! Back in the day, booktubers everywhere raved about a quirky little book called Ready Player One that took booktube by storm. This happened to be during the era when YA dystopia like The Hunger Games, Divergent, and Maze Runner were front and center, both in publishing and in film. But I was never really that invested in young adult, let alone young adult dystopia, to be quite honest, so when Ready Player One was one of the most talked about books in the community, I pretty much ignored it. Until about a year or so ago when boyfriend told me that he really likes the movie Ready Player One.
Yeah, it's not one of my all-time favorite, like not top 10, but maybe top 40.
But as usual, before I watched Ready Player One with boyfriend, I decided that I wanted to experience the novel first, so I went out and bought a copy and a copy of Ready Player 2 because I had such high hopes for this story. I fear I may have made a terrible mistake. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So this is how this is going to work. Much the same as the last video we made about the android's dream of Electric Sheep and Blade Runner. It's not so much... the cat is chatting to the birds. It's not so much a debate. It's not an argument. I'm going to talk about the book, which I have read and boyfriend has not, and how I feel about it, and he's going to talk about the movie and how he feels about it. Then we're going to compare the two and give you a verdict. The difference is that unlike the Blade Runner video that we made, this one does actually have a conclusion of which one is infinitely better than the other, and of course, huge spoilers ahead. So, let's get started!
Ready Player One, the novel.
Ready Player One is set in a dystopian 2045, where civilization has pretty much been ruined by climate change, poverty, and war, and other such fun things. The world has become such a wasteland that most people live out their lives inside a virtual reality called the Oasis. Even though the Oasis is technically a game, society has pretty much replaced the real world with it, even going as far as to do business inside the Oasis, attend school inside the Oasis, or even fall in love, get married, and settle down inside the Oasis. The book opens with our narrator, Wade Watts, setting the premise. The creator of the Oasis, James Halliday, has died and left a challenge in the wake of his death. Solve 3 riddles that will lead you to 3 challenges that will give you 3 keys that open 3 gates. Complete all of this and you will get the golden Easter egg and inherit the entire Oasis. James Halliday was a bit of a geek, and he left behind an almanac detailing who he was and all of the things he likes, or as it says in the book. The almanac was over 1,000 pages long, but it contained a few details about Halliday's personal life or his day-to-day activities. Most of the entries were his stream of consciousness observations on various classic video games, science fiction and fantasy novels, movies, comic books, and 80s pop culture, mixed with humorous diatribes denouncing everything from organized religion to diet soda. So the world pretty much assumes that Halliday left clues behind in the almanac, and they all unanimously become obsessed with 80s pop culture. Wade Watts is a self-conscious 17-year-old who lives in a slum with his abusive aunt. He spends most of his time inside the Oasis, basically worshipping Halliday and obsessing over the almanac and the challenge. Inside the Oasis, he goes by Parzival, an egg hunter, or gunter as they call them, and he's pretty much insignificant. He has a total of 1 friend named H, who is also a gunter, and has a huge cyber crush on Artemis, a blogger who likes to document her search for the egg. Some of the gunters work in clans, while others, most of them in fact, want the prize all to themselves. Even though in 5 years nobody has gotten any closer to acquiring the egg, the gunters are extremely competitive, with one clan in particular, IOI, even going as far as to pay people thousands, even millions of dollars to work for them and find the egg for them. See, IOI are a big evil corporation who want to take ownership of the Oasis so they can monetize it. IOI, or the Sixers as they're called, use unfair tactics to get ahead. Even though there are no rules in the challenge, IOI have enough money and manpower to play dirty, so nobody likes them. So one fine day, while Parzival is in his Latin class, he, by coincidence, figures out the answer to the first riddle. This leads him to the first challenge, to battle his way through Tomb of Horrors, an old D&D module, and then battle a lich in Joust, an old arcade game. He succeeds, and he's given the first key and a clue to where to find the gate that it opens. But right after he defeats the lich, guess who shows up? But Artemis. She's a bitch to him, but he helps her anyway, so she goes on to get the first key as well. Not long after that, H becomes the third person to get the key after figuring out where it must be based off of Parzival's location at the time. In no time at all three of them, and eventually the Sixers as well, make their way through the first gate. But because Parzival was the first one to do so, he's super famous now, and the race to the egg has been revitalized. IOI offered to pay Wade more money than he'll ever see in his life to join the Sixers and help them get the egg, but he declines, so they blow up his home in an attempt to remove him from the competition and also the planet. But conveniently, Wade wasn't at home. He was in his little hideout in the garbage somewhere far away, so he doesn't actually die in the attack. His aunt and a neighbor that he likes die in the blast, though. He mourns for like 1 second and just barely mourns, and then decides to move on with his life. He goes into hiding under an alias. He attempts a romance with Artemis, but she's a bitch to him, so he falls into a depression and then starts lagging behind in the competition. Meanwhile, IOI are farming keys with all of their Sixers so that they can have the biggest advantage in the race. A few months go by and Artemis becomes the first person to complete the second challenge. She's followed closely by H and two other characters, Shoto and Daito, who work as a team. Now, because IOI play dirty, they employ the aforementioned tactics to prevent people from accessing the keys. This puts pressure on Wade to find and complete the second challenge as quickly as he possibly can before they put up a gigantic force field that would stop him from accessing the location entirely. So he decides to kick himself in the butt and get going and make progress. While hunting the second key, Wade misinterprets the clue and thinks that he has to get the highest possible score in Pac-Man. So he does that and is rewarded with a teeny tiny little coin that does absolutely nothing. But eventually, and also conveniently, H helps him solve the clue properly this time, so he goes on to complete the second challenge and pretty much reclaims his spot at the top of the scoreboard. But IOI are not happy with this at all and start turning to more extreme measures. Their plan is to start picking off the leaders one by one in the real world. They find and kill real-world Daito and become the first team to solve the third clue. And then, of course, they put up the force fields again so nobody else can attempt to get the key. So Wade takes matters into his own hands. He infiltrates IOI, the gigantic evil corporation, by changing his personal records so that their debt collectors will come and arrest him and place him in indentured servitude. He then proceeds to slave away for them while simultaneously outsmarting them, hacking into their intranet even though they are constantly monitoring him. He downloads all of the incriminating evidence that is on their systems and then makes the most miraculous but also effortless escape that I have ever seen in my life. Also, while he's hacking into IOI systems and stumbling upon a paper trail that they're going to kill some people, he figures out who Artemis is in the real world and learns that she has a very big birthmark on her face and she's self-conscious about it, but he's such a good guy, so it doesn't bother him. So he goes into the Oasis, he makes contact with Artemis, H, and Shoto and warns them that IOI are coming to assassinate them. And then Artemis is a bitch to him. Regardless, the group decide that they will band together just this once to try and stop IOI. It also turns out that a man named Ogden Morrow, James Halliday's former best friend and business partner, just happened to be spying on their entire conversation the entire time, and so he offers them a place in the real world where they can put their plan in motion and stay safe and out of IOI's eyes. Wade then decides to leak all of the incriminating evidence that he downloaded from the IOI intranet to the public and sends out a call to arms to all of the Gunters out there to band together and launch a coordinated attack on the Sixers. So because of Ogden's offer, he ends up meeting H in person, and it turns out that she's not a big buff male as he thought. She's a lesbian black woman, but they stay best friends because he's such a good person. He's not racist or sexist. He just misses the opportunity to meet Shoto and Artemis because they are already plugged into the Oasis by the time H and Wade group with the rest of them. Shame. Boo-hoo. On the day of the battle, Gunters everywhere band together to try and stop IOI. A very big and very cool battle ensues, and IOI decide that they are going to deploy a game-destroying device that wipes out every single avatar in that sector, including their own. But, conveniently, Wade has an extra life because he got the highest score in Pac-Man. It was so convenient. On a serious note though, because Wade has that convenient extra life, he is the only avatar in that area of the Oasis for like miles and miles and miles and for a very long time. The Sixers are on their way, but they haven't had enough time to get back to that point yet, so he now has a head start and is the only person who actually has a shot of acquiring the third key. He can still communicate with people outside of the Oasis though, so his new best friends help him complete the third and final challenge, and Artemis is a bitch to him the entire time. So Wade goes on to win the egg and the entire Oasis, and he pledges to share his earnings with his new buddies. The book ends in the real world where Artemis, or Samantha as she's known this side of things, tells him, and I quote, that he is her best friend and favorite person. So they kiss, because of course they do, and Wade learns that life is worth living. The end.
That's it.
Where do I even begin with this book? To put it simply, this book is terrible. It's so bad. It's awful. I hate it so much. This is one of the worst books I have ever read in my entire life, and I will henceforth forever blame BookTube for that part of my trauma. Now don't get me wrong, the concept for this book is one of the most amazing that I have ever stumbled upon in my life. It's a really, really cool idea, but the storytelling, and particularly the writing, are atrocious. Absolutely atrocious. Objectively atrocious. This is not my opinion, this is just fact. For one, it's repetitive as shit. Please come with me on this journey. Most of the entries were his stream of consciousness observations on various classic video games, science fiction and fantasy novels, movies, comic books, and 80s pop culture. Its hard drive was filled with old books, movies, TV show episodes, song files, and nearly every video game made in the 20th century. She also linked to the books, movies, TV shows, and music she was currently studying. He did poorly in school because most of his attention was focused on computers, comic books, sci-fi and fantasy novels, movies, and above all else, video games. The almanac contained thousands of references to Halliday's favorite books, TV shows, movies, songs, graphic novels, and video games. I'd become addicted to the show immediately and had now watched all 180 episodes multiple times. I never seemed to get tired of them. I'd exhaustively studied his life, accomplishments, and interests. Over a dozen different Halliday biographies had been published in the year since his death, and I'd read them all. Several documentary films had also been made about him, and I'd studied those too. I'd studied every word Halliday had ever written, and I'd played every video game he'd ever made. I took notes, writing down every detail I thought might be related to the hunt. When it came to my research, I never took any shortcuts. Over the past 5 years, I'd worked my way down the entire recommended Gunter reading list. I read every novel by every single one of Halliday's favorite authors. I spent 3 months studying every John Hughes teen movie and memorizing all the key lines of dialogue. I learned the name of every last goddamn GoBot and Transformer. I memorized every last Bull Hicks stand-up routine. I read every issue of every comic book title Halliday had ever collected. I downloaded every game mentioned or referenced in the almanac. I worked my way through every video game genre and platform. I think you get my point. Oh, by the way, that was just in the first 100 pages of this book, and that was me just skimming the pages to spot them. It doesn't get any better. The entire book is like that. Secondly, the characters in this book are awful! Wade is so far up his own ass you wouldn't be able to tell where he begins and where he ends. Artemis is the most one-dimensional and insufferable female I have ever read about. The big bad evil guy is literally just there. Shoto and Daito are a wasted opportunity because even though they're pretty cool, they were pushed to the background until it's convenient. Even though H is really, really cool, people aren't too pleased with her because she feels a little bit too much like a token. And as for Ogdenmaru, he's just a
Deus Ex Machina!
As for the story itself, it's just not told well. At all. Most of it is just Wade telling us about the unfathomably miraculous things that he does, without any explanation except, I already set up the things that made this possible, and also I'm amazing, worship me. Also, Ernest Cline's writing is just cringe. I watched a lot of YouTube videos of cute, geeky girls playing 80s cover tunes on ukuleles. Technically, this wasn't part of my research, but I had a serious cute geeky girls playing ukuleles fetish that I can neither explain nor defend. I would argue that masturbation is the human animal's most important adaptation, the very cornerstone of our technological civilization. Our hands evolved to grip tools, all right, including our own. You see, thinkers, inventors, and scientists are usually geeks, and geeks have a harder time getting laid than anyone. Without the built-in sexual release valve provided by masturbation, it's doubtful that early humans would have ever mastered the secrets of fire or discovered the wheel. And you can bet that Galileo, Newton, and Einstein never would have made their discoveries if they hadn't first been able to clear their heads by slapping the salami or knocking a few protons off the old hydrogen atom. The same goes for Marie Curie. Before she discovered radium, you can be certain she first discovered the little man in the canoe. Ernest Cline writes like a frustrated man-child who is overcompensating for something and is also a bit of a creep and a perv, and I hate it, I hate it, I hate it so much! I hate it! Oh, and one more thing, this book has way more 80s references than it does plot. In conclusion, bad book. Very, very, very bad book. 2 out of 10. Anyway, moving on to...
Ready Player One. The movie.
Similar to the book, the world is pretty much in ruins. We got problems with the environment, there's overpopulation. It's it's not nice. It's not a nice place. So, because the world sucks moldy, dry toast, people escape to a video game. And in this case, it's the Oasis. As in the book, same thing. Movie Wade is still poor as shit and can't afford to pay his way out of a wet paper bag. And he lives with his aunt and her latest dickhead boyfriend in a high-rise trailer park. He heads to his little junkyard hideout, starts up his rig, and enters the Oasis. From there, we see what it's like in the Oasis, and it looks pretty. You can tell why they want to escape. The Oasis is a world where you can be anything, do anything, without any limitations. Similar to the book, James Halliday dies and leaves the challenges for people to find his Easter egg and inherit the Oasis. The first clue led to the first challenge, which is a race that, so far in 5 years, nobody's managed to beat. Everybody's practically given up. The only people still trying to win this race are a few Gunters and the Sixers. Now, this race is a great setup for the whole movie and what you're gonna see. It's designed like a nightmare Hot Wheels track, traps and T-Rex included. Wade enters the race and his broke ass has to sit all the way in the back because he's got to skim coins from anybody who crashes. By some miracle, Wade manages to take his DeLorean all the way through the race, close to the finish line, but he just cannot get past the big monkey himself, Kong. Artemis tries to rush through and finish the race, and Wade, aka Parzival, knows that she can't make it, so pulls her off her motorbike. The bike is an unfortunate casualty of Kong's rage. She's obviously pissed, so she's a bitch to him. Parzival mentions that his buddy H can fix her bike, so they head off to his workshop, where they get into a little bit of an argument, and she's a bitch to him. But something she says in this little argument gives him a bit of a hint as to how to win the race. Parzival heads to the movie version of the almanac, which is called the Halliday Journals, a physical building that you go in and actually look through the archives of his life. Now, the Halliday Journals has a curator, who's assumed to be an NPC. Wade's a bit dense, so the curator has to sort of spell it out for him and make sure that he gets this clue. Drive backwards, and you glitch under the map and end up, cool, finish the race. So Parzival wins the race, gets the key, and the clue to the next challenge, and apparently a lot of money. Like in any game, once one person figures out a challenge, everybody figures it out. So soon after, Artemis, H, Daito, and Sho all complete the race. And of course, the Sixers. The head of the Sixers, Nolan Sorrento, starts making dodgy deals with an in-game mercenary named IROC. Meanwhile, everybody else is working on the second clue to try and figure it out. While they're doing research at the Halliday journals, they make a bet with the curator for all their coin. And the curator loses, and flicks a single quarter at Parzival. Artemis and Parzival start working together and flirting just a little bit. Artemis is sure that the clue leads to a dance club, so they go to a dance party there. They have a great time at the dance club, and Wade, in a moment of weakness, reveals his true identity. IROC overhears this, and IOI attacks. Parzival tells Artemis that he loves her, and she's a bitch to him. Like in the book, Parzival gets an offer from IOI to work for the Sixers, and he declines, so they blow up his home, his aunt, and her dickhead boyfriend. Wade, not even given a chance to mourn, promptly gets kidnapped. Wade wakes up in a room with a strange woman who turns out to be the true identity of Artemis, Samantha Cook. She welcomes him into the resistance against IOI. Artemis and Parzival figure out the clue to the second challenge. They invite H, Daito, and Sho, and over time, all 5 of them manage to get the second key. IOI manages to track down the resistance headquarters and attacks. Samantha sacrifices herself so that Wade can escape, and she gets captured by IOI. By some miracle, H finds him on the street and rescues him. Daito and Sho are also with her. Artemis is taken to an IOI loyalty center because, contrary to the book, it's her who's put into indentured servitude. Meanwhile, the Sixers have all solved the second challenge and figured out the location of the third. And, like a bunch of dickhead campers, they're rigging the entire place to blow. From this point, a lot of shit happens back to back. IROC uses a level 99 artifact to create a force field around the final challenge. Every single Sixer lines up to try and complete the third challenge, which is an Atari frickin' game. H manages to hack Sorrento's rig and make him think that he's in the real world when he's still in the Oasis. They threaten Sorrento into giving them the location of Artemis. They try to free Artemis, but instead she goes to Sorrento's office to try and get the deactivation code for the artifact. Parzival broadcasts to the whole of the Oasis to get them all together to form one massive army for a siege. Artemis goes in as a Sixer to shut down the artifact, and a massive battle ensues. One thing leads to another. Parzival and Sorrento duke it out. Sorrento activates a device that wipes out every avatar on the map, including his own. All except our hero, Parzival, whose lucky little quarter that the curator gave him turns out to be an extra life. Wade completes the final challenge and meets a virtual Halliday. Meanwhile, Sorrento is on his way to them in the real world. Wade wins the challenge and gets Halliday's Easter egg just in the nick of time. Wade wins the Oasis, Sorrento gets arrested, and Ogden Morrow shows up. Turns out he's actually the curator. Ogden introduces Wade to the lawyers with a bunch of paperwork for the ownership of the Oasis, and Wade decides to split ownership with his friends. They basically banned the Sixers and decided to shut down the Oasis on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The movie ends off with Wade and Samantha in their nice new apartment, and they smooch and credits roll. So now, onto my thoughts. This movie panders directly to me, and I am not complaining. It has an absolute metric ton of references to the things I love. As a gamer, I appreciate all of the little tropes that they put in that just drive the story. It's an original story and a fantastic spectacle of a movie. I found it incredibly impressive how many IP rights they got for this movie, like how much they just crammed in. It was phenomenal. The cinematography gets a clean chef's kiss from me, like absolute.
Also from me.
It's not perfect. The storytelling feels a little bit lazy, but that doesn't matter because cool stuff. Final verdict, 8 out of 10.
Back to me. So, before we declare a winner in this video, we have to compare them side by side and tell you the most important things that change between the two of them. In this Godforsaken book, Wade is an arrogant douche-canoe, self-elating asshat who is unnaturally incredible at everything because reasons.
In the movie, Wade is just a nice guy, he's a typical gamer, he's super nerdy, and gets by on pure determination.
In this Godforsaken book, Artemis is one-dimensional, and that one dimension is bitch.
In the movie, Artemis is actually cool.
In this godforsaken book, Wade and Samantha, Artemis, whatever the fuck, have absolutely no chemistry, and their relationship is not justified at all.
In the movie, the chemistry between Wade and Artemis, Parzival and Artemis, is made perfectly clear very early on.
And it's cute. In this godforsaken book, Artemis is not in a resistance. She has nothing to do with a resistance because there is no resistance.
Whereas Artemis and the Resistance are central to the plot in the movie.
In this godforsaken book, Shoto and Daito have a lot more depth. I also feel like in the book they are a lot more serious and not as silly or gimmicky.
The movie, on the other hand, took a completely different path. It's Daito and Sho in this, and both of them come across as more of a sort of a comic relief.
In the book, H comes across as a lot cooler, and she's more of a doofus in the movie, I'm not gonna lie, but she's very funny in the movie, and is kind of my favorite character in both. In this godforsaken book, the character Finale does not exist. She's just not there, and therefore the plot that she is involved in is also just not there. In this godforsaken book, Irock is pretty much insignificant. Like, yes, he's an asshole, and his actions lead IOI and Sorrento to being able to track down Wade in the real world, but it's not deliberate. He's just trying to spite them and tells everybody that he knows where Parzival goes to school and, like, lets that information into the public, and IOI figure it out from there. Other than that, he's just a douchebag and completely insignificant and mostly irrelevant as well. As for Sorrento, he's very much cardboard. Like, we don't really care. He doesn't have that much personality. And yes, he is the big bad evil guy, but he's a really terrible one.
In the movie, Irock and Sorrento are very different. Irock is a badass mercenary type, but he's also a stereotypical hardcore gamer.
He's a bit thick.
He's a bit thick.
Just a little bit. He's dense.
Stereotypical gamer! As opposed to the book, he is a lot more important. He plays a central part. Movie Sorrento is a lot more charismatic and actually pulls off the evil corporate villain.
In this godforsaken book, Ogden Morrow is very different. Like with Daito and Shoto, he has a lot more substance, a lot more depth. The story is kind of same but different. He was friends with James Halliday, was business partners. They did have a falling out. It did have to do with the woman. He's pretty much a hermit in the story. He just keeps to himself until it comes out that he was spying on them all along and decides to intervene and help them. But that's pretty much it. He's cool, but he's not as central.
Movie Ogden is a tiny bit cheesy, but he's not even remotely close to being a Deus Ex Machina.
In this godforsaken book, there are way too many references and throwbacks to things. I'm sorry, I know that most of this book's appeal was the nostalgia and the callbacks and stuff like that, but it's excessive. He didn't have to turn it up to over 9,000. To prove my point, I want to read something to you. This one.
Help!
Over the course of 3 pages early in this book, here is everything that is referenced. Douglas Adams, Kurt Vonnegut, Neil Stephenson, Richard K. Morgan, Stephen King, Orson Scott Card, Terry Pratchett, Terry Brooks, Bester Bradbury, Haldeman, Heinlein, Tolkien, Vance, Gibson, Gaiman, Sterling, Moorcock, Scalzi, and Selazny. War Games, Ghostbusters, Real Genius, Better of Dead, Revenge of the Nerds, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, The Matrix, Mad Max, Back to the Future, Indiana Jones, particularly Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, James Cameron, Gilliam, Jackson, Fincher, Kubrick, Lucas, Spielberg, Del Toro, Tarantino, and of course, Kevin Smith, John Hughes, Monty Python, particularly Holy Grail. Does BBC count? Because he mentions BBC series. The Greatest American Hero, Airwolf, The A-Team, Knight Rider, Misfits of Science, and The Muppet Show, The Simpsons, and also Springfield. Star Trek, particularly TOS, TNG, and DS9, 08, and Voyager and Enterprise 2. Then Land of the Lost, Thundar the Barbarian, He-Man, Schoolhouse Rock, and G.I. Joe. H.R. Puffin Stuff, Godzilla, Gamera, Star Blazers, The Space Giants, G-Force, Go Speed Racer Go. Bull Hicks, The Police, Journey, R.E.M., and The Clash. They Might Be Giants, YouTube, if that counts as well. Van Halen, Bon Jovi, Def Leppard, and Pink Floyd. Midnight Oil, particularly Beds of Burning. Jeopardy. I don't know if these are real world things, but it mentions something called a Calibeth and also Zaxxon. Then, apart from like specific things, he also mentions classic arcade coin-ops, home computers, consoles, and handheld text-based adventures, first-person shooters, third-person RPGs, ancient 8, 16, and 32-bit classics, and Defender. I'm pretty sure that I could randomly flip to any page of this book and find a reference to some other franchise or the 80s itself. Let's see. The Space Giants. And the 80s. The 70s hacker named John Draper, better known by the alias Captain Crunch. You see what I mean? Do you want to try?
See what? Yep. We got a WWF match from the 80s featuring Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant. The movie clearly has an advantage here, because it can actually show you the reference physically without spouting exposition for 3 fucking pages.
I really feel like this book shouldn't have been a book. If he wanted to add that many fucking references, he should have just written it as a script or a screenplay or whatever from the very beginning. It does not work on paper. One of the few things that I think was better in this godforsaken book was the world building. I perfectly understand that the movie was limited to its runtime, it was limited to its licensing, it was limited to its production and stuff like that. But the book just has more in it. One other thing that I feel this godforsaken book did much better than the movie is the actual competition, the challenges, and the race to find the Easter egg to claim ownership of the Oasis. Based purely on the fact that I think it was a lot more thought out in the book, and there was a lot more detail. A lot of emphasis was placed on the riddles and the difficulty of the challenge as well, and there was just so much more to get invested into. At the end of the day, I would say that the book and the movie are about 50% the same. They're not like Blade Runner and Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, where it's like 99% different. They are very, very, very different stories still, though, so if you have read the book and want to watch the movie, do not expect it to be the same story, because it's not. And if you have seen the movie and you want to read the book, you're in for something else. And so, at long last, we get to the brunt of this video. Which is better?
Ready Player One, the novel.
Or
Ready Player One, the movie.
Ready Player One, the book, is unlike any other young adult story I have ever read. In fact, it is unlike any other story that I have ever read. It is one of the most original and one of the most unique books that I can think of. Also, as much as I have been talking shit about this book the whole day, it was so engrossing I physically could not put this thing down. I had to know what was going to happen next. But, and it's a big but, the book's just not good. It's just not good. I'm sorry, it's not good at all. This book is a fucking train smash. Okay, I hated reading it. I hated reading it so much, but I got invested and I just could not stop reading it even though I was in agony. Ernest Cline cannot write for shit. His writing is bad, and he should feel bad. And I think the biggest point that I would like to make right now, like, if you take anything away from this video, please let it be this. The nostalgia factor does not outweigh its shortcomings, and this book is 95% shortcomings. I would recommend reading Player One, if you enjoy having migraines, this was a great idea. It was a fantastic idea, but its execution was caca bullshit. Burn it! It's bad! It's so bad!
As for the movie, it had some clear advantages. First off, it's a Spielberg movie. The visuals and cinematography get 100% score. They were bloody phenomenal. But the plot in the film was a bit mediocre. Unfortunately, where the film lacks is the fact that it was limited by its 2-hour runtime. 2 hours, 19 minutes, but most of that is credits to fit in all of the freaking, hey, special thanks to Kodansha and Bandai and fucking Namco and everyone. The film was incredibly detailed and used its IPs to the maximum. That just gave it this rewatchability. You could rewatch it, you could freeze frame it. Every single time you would spot something new. It's funny and it's easy to watch. This movie is clearly pandering to the geeks, but you don't have to be one to enjoy it. But if you are a geek, treat this like an Easter egg hunt, because oh my god, it is so much fun. Just pause and point out as many things as you can. Make it a game. It's not perfect, but it's so entertaining that you won't even care about its shortcomings.
So now, on to the verdict. Drum roll, please. Y'all know that I am a bookworm, and I have always been a bookworm. Books are like my favorite thing in the world. It doesn't even pain me to tell you that the movie is better, because it is so much better. This book is so bad that it's not even a question. Watch the movie. Okay, if you want to experience Ready Player One, just watch the movie, because the book's not worth it. It's not worth it. Please do not make the same mistakes that I have made. I will say that the story in the book is better, but it's agony. This book is written so badly that you almost can't enjoy the story, no matter how original or cool it is. Whereas with the movie, the story is kinda subpar, but it's so much more enjoyable. And that's the key word here. Enjoyment. Okay, this channel is Geekish Civilian, welcome to it, where the whole purpose of this channel and why it kinda transitioned into movies was because I just wanted to talk about the things that I enjoy without having to justify my enjoyment of them. So obviously this channel is about having fun. The book is not fun!
Honestly, after hearing her complain about that book while reading it, I've come to the conclusion that I would rather have a Tabasco enema than read it.
And so it boils down to this. This book is objectively bad, but its movie is objectively good. It's one of the better movies that I've seen, actually. Not gonna lie.
Spielberg.
Yeah, less is more. And there you have it. So in the comments, let me know what you think of Ready Player One the book, what you think of Ready Player One the movie. Have you read the book? Have you watched the movie? Do you like the book? Do you like the movie? Do you hate the book? Do you hate the movie? Which one do you prefer? If you liked this video, I will appreciate you letting me know that, because I will take all of the validation I can get. Subscribe! But other than that, I think that we are both very tired and we're going to shut up now. Okay, bye. A few months go by and Artemis becomes the first person to complete the second challenge, followed closely by H and 2 other characters, Shoto.
So because of this, people want to escape and just live in a video game, so they're living their la la la. Okay. So, yes. Why am I the reason for these reels?
Ashushed.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Appreciate.
I know. That's why I did it. I'm just kidding.
The only guys still trying is a few Gunters and the Sixers.
Said is a few gunters.
Sus!
Is you embarrassed?
Artemis goes in as a Sixer, manages to shut down the battery. The battery?
Daddy.
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 Daddy sounds so wrong.
Harder, Daddy.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
If you ever say anything like that, I'll stop.
Now I'm gonna say it out of spite. It's racist, boyfriend. You know, on Samsung phones, if you do this to the camera, it will like auto record or auto take the photo. I tried to do this so that it would start filming and it fucking didn't. And then Ronnie did this and all of a sudden it's recording. It's racist.
It is programmed for raw chicken.